I felt his fingers trace along my spine, deliberate and slow, as if he was memorizing every curve. The hospital bed creaked softly beneath us, but neither of us cared about the sound. His breath was warm against my neck, sending shivers through me that had nothing to do with the cool air conditioning. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible in the dim light filtering through the curtain that separated us from the world outside. I turned to face him, our bodies pressed close on the narrow mattress, and nodded. The machines hummed quietly around us, but all I could focus on was the heat building between us, the way his eyes held mine with an intensity that made my heart race. Понравилось начало? Ставьте лайк, подписывайтесь. Пишите в комментариях, что вас зацепило больше всего. The fluorescent lights had been dimmed for hours, casting long shadows across the sterile hospital corridor. I shifted uncomfortably in my bed, the thin gown clinging to my skin, when I heard him, Logan, moving restlessly in the bed next to mine. We'd been sharing this room for 3 days now, both recovering from minor procedures, both trying to make the best of an uncomfortable situation. Can't sleep either? His voice cut through the darkness, low and smooth, with just a hint of that accent I'd been trying to place since I arrived. I turned my head toward the sound, seeing his silhouette, outlined by the faint glow from the nurse's station down the hall. "The beds aren't exactly designed for comfort," I replied, allowing myself a small smile even though he probably couldn't see it. Logan chuckled softly. "I've been in worse places. At least here they bring you food on a schedule." Something about his tone made me curious. "What do you do? When you're not stuck in hospital beds, I mean." "Construction. Heavy machinery mostly." He paused, and I could hear the rustle of sheets as he shifted. "You? Project management for a marketing firm. Definitely less exciting than it sounds." "Tessa, right? I heard the nurse call you that earlier." The way he said my name sent an unexpected warmth through me. "That's right, and you're Logan." "Guilty. As charged." We fell into an easy conversation, voices kept low to avoid disturbing other patients. He told me about the job site accident that had brought him here. Nothing serious, just some stitches and observation. I shared my own story, the minor surgery that had seemed so significant until now. As the hours passed, our words grew softer, more intimate. The darkness created a bubble around us, a private world where the usual rules didn't seem to apply. When he mentioned his failed marriage, I found myself opening up about my own relationship struggles, things I rarely discussed with anyone. "You know what's strange?" Logan's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "I feel like I can tell you anything." My pulse quickened. "I know what you mean." The silence that followed was charged, electric. I could hear my own heartbeat in the quiet room, could sense the shift in energy between us. When Logan spoke again, his words made my breath catch. I keep thinking about getting up and walking over there. I swallowed hard, my skin suddenly feeling too warm beneath the thin hospital gown. "What's stopping you?" The same thing that should be stopping me from wanting to. I understood exactly what he meant. This was dangerous territory. We were both vulnerable, both away from our normal lives, both caught in this strange, suspended reality of the hospital. But understanding the risk didn't make the pull any less intense. "Logan," I started, not sure what I was going to say. "I know, this is crazy." But even as he said it, I heard the soft whisper of sheets, the quiet creak of a bed frame. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized he was moving, actually getting up. The room seemed to hold its breath as his bare feet touched the cold linoleum floor. "Tell me to go back to my bed," he said, his voice now much closer. I knew I should have. Instead, I shifted over slightly, making room beside me on the narrow mattress. "I can't do that." The bed dipped as he settled beside me, and suddenly every nerve in my body was hyper-aware. The scent of him, clean, soap and something uniquely male, filled my senses. His warmth radiated through the thin fabric of our hospital gowns, and when his hand found mine in the darkness, I felt like I might stop breathing altogether. "This is insane," I whispered, but I didn't pull away. "Completely," he agreed, his thumb tracing slow circles on the back of my hand. We lay there for what felt like an eternity, the air between us crackling with tension. When he finally turned to face me, I could feel his breath on my cheek, could see the outline of his features in the dim light. "Tessa," he said, my name a question and a promise all at once. I turned toward him, our faces now inches apart. The rational part of my mind screamed warnings, but they were drowned out by the thundering of my pulse, the heat building between us despite every reason this was wrong. When his lips finally touched mine, it was soft at first, tentative, giving me one last chance to change my mind. But I was already lost, already sinking into the warmth of him. The kiss deepened, became hungrier, more desperate. My hands found the fabric of his gown, pulling him closer until there was no space left between us. His fingers tangled in my hair, and I could feel the rapid rhythm of his breathing as he trailed kisses along my jaw, down to the sensitive spot just below my ear. A soft sound escaped my lips, and he stilled for a moment. "Someone might hear," he whispered against my skin. "Then we'll have to be very quiet," I breathed back, surprised by my own boldness. His response was a low groan that sent heat spiraling through me. His hands began to explore, mapping the curves of my body through the thin hospital fabric. Every touch was electric, every caress sending waves of sensation through me that I hadn't felt in far too long. I arched into his touch as his palm found the curve of my waist, his fingers tracing patterns that made my breath hitch. The hospital gown became an unwelcome barrier, and somehow, with whispered movements and careful maneuvering, we managed to push the fabric aside. The feeling of skin against skin was overwhelming. Logan's body was solid and warm, a stark contrast to the clinical coldness of our surroundings. His hands moved with surprising gentleness, as if he was afraid I might disappear if he held too tightly. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his voice rough with desire. I felt beautiful under his gaze, under his touch. My own hands explored the planes of his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath my palm. When I traced the line of a scar along his ribs, he shuddered, and the reaction sent a thrill through me. We moved together slowly, carefully, mindful of the narrow bed and the need for silence. Every motion was deliberate, every touch meaningful. When he positioned himself above me, his weight supported on his forearms, I felt a moment of perfect clarity. This was exactly where I wanted to be. Consequences be damned. The connection was gentle at first, both of us adjusting to the intimacy, to each other. Logan's eyes never left mine, searching for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he began to move with a rhythm that built slowly, steadily, like a tide rolling in. I matched his movements, my body responding to his with an intuition. That surprised me. We fit together perfectly, as if we'd been designed for this moment. The heat between us grew, the tension building with each careful thrust, each whispered breath. My hands gripped his shoulders, feeling the muscles tense and relax as he moved. The hospital bed protested softly beneath us, but the sound was lost in the quiet symphony of our breathing, the almost silent sounds of our bodies coming together. Logan's forehead touched mine, our breath mingling in the small space between us. "God, Tessa," he whispered, and the way he said my name made me feel like I was melting from the inside out. The pressure was building inside me, a coiling tension that threatened to consume me entirely. Logan seemed to sense it, his movements becoming more focused, more intense while still maintaining that careful quietness our situation demanded. When the release finally came, it crashed over me like a wave, stealing my breath and making me arch against him. I bit down on my lip to keep from crying out, my nails digging into his shoulders as pleasure coursed through me. Logan followed moments later, his body tensing as he buried his face in my neck, his own quiet sound of completion, muffled against my skin. We lay entwined afterward, hearts racing, breathing slowly returning to normal. The reality of what we'd done began to seep back in, but I found I couldn't regret it. Not when Logan's arm was wrapped around me like this, not when I felt more alive than I had in months. "We should probably—" Logan started, his voice reluctant. "No," I whispered back, but neither of us moved. Eventually, though, practicality won out. Logan pressed a soft kiss to my forehead before carefully disentangling himself and returning to his own bed. The loss of his warmth left me feeling hollow, but the memory of his touch lingered on my skin. I pulled the thin blanket up to my chin and tried to steady my breathing. Across the room, I could hear Logan doing the same, both of us pretending to sleep while our minds raced with the implications of what had just happened. The next morning brought harsh fluorescent light and the bustle of hospital routine. I woke to the sound of nurses making their rounds, their cheerful voices a stark contrast to the intimate whispers that had filled the room just hours before. Logan was already awake when I opened my eyes, sitting up in his bed with a cup of coffee that someone had brought him. Our eyes met across the room, and I felt that same electric current pass between us. But in the bright light of day, it felt different, more complicated. "Good morning," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Morning," I replied, acutely aware of how normal we both sounded when nothing about this situation felt normal at all. Dr. Peterson arrived shortly after breakfast, clipboard in hand, and that professionally cheerful expression that all doctors seem to master. She checked my incision, asked about my pain levels, and pronounced me ready for discharge. "You can head home this afternoon," she announced. "Just take it easy for the next few days." I nodded, trying to look appropriately grateful while my mind spun. Going home meant leaving Logan behind, meant returning to my regular life and pretending that last night had never happened. The thought left me feeling strangely bereft. As Dr. Peterson moved on to Logan, I found myself listening intently to every word. His recovery was progressing well too, but he'd need to stay another day or two for observation. The news hit me harder than it should have. We'd known this was temporary, but somehow I'd managed to forget that fact in the space between yesterday and today. The afternoon passed in a blur of discharge paperwork and the gathering of my few belongings. Logan and I exchanged polite conversation when the nurses were around, but the weight of our shared secret hung heavy in the air between us. It wasn't until I was actually dressed in my street clothes, purse in hand, and ready to leave, that the reality of the situation truly hit me. This was it. I was walking away from whatever this was, returning to my carefully ordered life as if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. "Take care of yourself," Logan said as I paused beside his bed, the words feeling inadequate for everything I wanted to say. "You too," I managed, my throat tight with emotions I couldn't name. For a moment, we just looked at each other, and I saw my own confusion and longing reflected in his dark eyes. Then the moment passed, broken by the arrival of a nurse with his afternoon medications. I walked out of that hospital room and down the corridor toward the elevator, each step feeling heavier than the last. But as I waited for the doors to open, I heard footsteps behind me. "Tessa, wait." I turned to find Logan hurrying toward me, still wearing his hospital gown, but with a determination in his eyes that made my heart skip. "I can't let you just walk away," he said, slightly out of breath. "Not after last night." The elevator dinged, doors sliding open to reveal an empty car. I looked at it, then back at Logan, standing there in the middle of the hospital corridor in nothing but a thin gown, having risked getting in trouble with the nursing staff just to stop me from leaving. "This is crazy," I whispered. "I know," he said, stepping closer. "But I need to see you again, away from here, when we're both thinking clearly. I need to know if this was real or just some kind of hospital fever dream." I knew exactly what he meant. The sterile environment, the vulnerability of being patients, the strange suspended reality of hospital time. It could all play tricks on the mind, make things seem more intense than they really were. But looking at him now, seeing the genuine emotion in his eyes, I didn't think that was what this was. "My phone," I said quickly, pulling it from my purse. "Give me your number." He rattled off the digits, and I entered them with shaking fingers. The elevator doors were starting to close, but I held them open with my hand. "I'll call you," I promised. "Tomorrow?" he asked, hope evident in his voice. "Tomorrow," I agreed. I stepped into the elevator and watched his face until the doors closed between us. As the car descended toward the lobby, I felt like I was leaving part of myself behind on that 4th floor. The ride home was a blur of city streets and afternoon traffic. I went through the motions of returning to my normal life, checking mail, responding to work emails, restocking my refrigerator, but my mind kept drifting back to the hospital, to Logan, to the way he'd looked at me in the darkness. That evening, I found myself standing at my bedroom window, looking out at the city lights and thinking about parallel lives. Somewhere across town, Logan was probably lying in that same narrow hospital bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the same things I was. What if we'd never been in that room together? What if I'd been assigned to a different ward? Or if his accident had happened a week later? We would have remained strangers, two people whose paths never crossed, never knowing what we might have found in each other. But we had been there, together, in that strange liminal space between sickness and health, between our normal lives and something entirely unknown. And now I had to decide what to do with the gift of that encounter. My phone sat silent on the nightstand, Logan's number glowing, on the screen where I'd saved it under his name. It would be so easy to delete it, to let this remain a beautiful, impossible memory. To return to my safe, predictable life and pretend that nothing had changed. But as I lay in my own bed, surrounded by my own familiar things, I realized I didn't want safe anymore. I wanted the electricity I'd felt in Logan's arms, the sense of being truly alive that had coursed through me in that hospital room. I reached for my phone. The next morning, I woke to find a text message waiting for me. "Discharged early. Couldn't stop thinking about our conversation yesterday. Coffee?" I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart racing with the same intensity I'd felt in that hospital bed. This was my choice point. I could ignore the message, let it fade into the digital ether, and continue on as if none of this had ever happened, or I could take a leap of faith. I typed back, "I know a place. When and where?" His response came almost immediately. "Now, anywhere. I've been up all night thinking about you." The honesty in those words took my breath away. This wasn't just physical attraction or the strange intimacy of shared circumstances. This was real, whatever this was. An hour later, I found myself sitting across from Logan in a small cafe downtown, both of us showered and dressed in normal clothes, trying to navigate this new reality. He looked different in jeans and a sweater, more solid somehow, more real. but his eyes were the same, warm and intense and full of the same questions I was carrying. "I wasn't sure you'd actually text back," he admitted, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "I wasn't sure I would either," I confessed. "But I couldn't stop thinking about it. About you." We talked for hours, covering everything from childhood, memories to career ambitions to the strange circumstances that had brought us together. Away from the hospital, in the bright light of day, I half expected the magic to fade, for whatever we'd felt to reveal itself as nothing more than circumstance and proximity. Instead, it only grew stronger. Logan was funny and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard, and insights that made me see familiar things in new ways. He asked questions that showed he was really listening, really seeing me, in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. "I have a confession," he said as we walked along the waterfront after lunch, the afternoon sun warm on our faces. "Oh?" I tried to keep my voice light, but my pulse quickened. "I've been in that hospital before, 3 times actually, over the past 2 years. Different things, a broken arm, some tests, minor surgery. And I've never once felt compelled to have a midnight conversation with my roommate, let alone," he trailed off, color rising in his cheeks, "let alone seduce them in their hospital bed," I finished, smiling despite myself. I was going to say, "Connect with them," but your version is more accurate. We stopped walking, turning to face each other. The water lapped gently against the pier and seagulls called overhead, but all of my attention was focused on the man standing in front of me. "So what does that mean?" I asked. "I think it means this isn't just some weird hospital thing," Logan said, reaching out to brush a strand of hair back from my face. "I think it means you're different, special." The touch of his fingers against my skin sent the same electricity through me that I'd felt in that narrow hospital bed. But this time, there was no clinical setting to blame it on, no unusual circumstances to explain away the intensity of my reaction. This was just us. "Logan," I started, not sure what I wanted to say. "I know we barely know each other," he continued. "I know this is moving fast and probably crazy, but I don't want to pretend that what happened between us was just some random thing. I want to explore this, whatever this is." Looking into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, I realized I wanted the same thing. The safe, predictable life I'd been living suddenly seemed colorless compared to the vibrant possibility standing in front of me. "Okay," I said simply. "Okay, let's see where this goes." His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. "Really?" Instead of answering with words, I stood on my tiptoes and kissed him, right there on the waterfront with the whole world watching. It was different from our desperate, whispered encounter in the hospital. Softer, sweeter, but no less intense. When we broke apart, Logan rested his forehead against mine. "So," he said, his voice slightly breathless, "your place or mine?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Mine's closer." The drive to my apartment was charged with anticipation. Every red light felt like an eternity, every moment of distance between us too much to bear. Logan's hand found mine across the center console, and the simple contact sent heat spiraling through me. By the time we reached my building, I was practically vibrating with need. We barely made it through my front door before Logan's hands were in my hair, his mouth claiming mine with a hunger that matched my own. "Are you sure about this?" he asked against my lips, echoing his words from that first night. "I've never been more sure of anything," I breathed back. This time, there were no thin hospital gowns to navigate, no need for whispered silence, no narrow bed to constrain our movements. This time, we had space and privacy and all the time in the world to explore each other properly. Logan's hands were reverent as they mapped my body, learning every curve and hollow, every place that made me gasp or arch into his touch. When he lifted me easily and carried me to my bedroom, I felt like I was floating. We took our time undressing each other, savoring each new expanse of revealed skin. Logan's body was even more beautiful in the soft light filtering through my bedroom windows, lean and strong, marked here and there with scars that told stories I wanted to hear. When he laid me back on my own bed, his eyes dark with desire, I felt like the most beautiful woman in the world. His hands and mouth worshipped me with an attention that left me breathless, building me up slowly, carefully, until I was trembling with need. "Please," I whispered, and he needed no further encouragement. This time, when we came together, it was with full awareness, full choice, full presence. There was no rushing, no fear of discovery, just the two of us learning each other's rhythms, finding a harmony that felt as natural as breathing. Logan moved above me with a focused intensity that made me feel cherished, desired, completely alive. Every thrust sent waves of pleasure through me, building toward something that felt bigger than just physical release. When the climax finally took me, it was with Logan's name on my lips and his eyes locked on mine. He followed moments later, my name a prayer in his throat as he collapsed beside me, gathering me close against his chest. We lay entwined in the golden afternoon light, hearts gradually slowing, breathing returning to normal. But unlike that first night in the hospital, there was no urgency to separate, no practical considerations forcing us apart. "No regrets?" Logan asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "None," I said, and meant it completely, as evening fell and we talked quietly in my bed, sharing stories and dreams and fears. I realized that what had started as a moment of weakness or rebellion had become something much more significant. Logan wasn't just a distraction from my normal life. He was showing me what my life could be like if I was brave enough to reach for it. "What happens now?" I asked as the last light faded from the windows. "Now," Logan said, pressing a soft kiss to the top of my head. "We see what happens next." It wasn't a guarantee, wasn't a promise of forever, but it was an acknowledgement that this, whatever this was worth exploring, worth the risk of changing everything. Looking back now, I can trace the exact moment my life split into before and after that first whispered conversation in a sterile hospital room, two strangers finding connection in the most unlikely of places. What started as a moment of shared vulnerability became the foundation of something I never could have anticipated. Sometimes the most important encounters happen when we're not looking for them, when we're stripped of our usual defenses and pretenses. Sometimes we find exactly what we need in the place we least expect it. What would you have done in that hospital room? Would you have been brave enough to reach for something unknown, or would you have stayed safe in your own bed? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear about the moments that changed your life, the connections you never saw coming. Don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe for more stories about taking chances and finding love in unexpected places. Until next time, remember that sometimes the best things happen when we're brave enough to say yes to the unknown.